Hello, cult hackers, and welcome to the podcast. I'm Celine, a media graduate with an interest in cults.
And I'm her dad. I'm Stephen. I work as an organisational psychologist, and I am also interested in cults. And I was raised in one for the first 30 years of my life until you came along, Celine.
Yep.
That's the story, and we're sticking to it. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so today is a bit of a different one, I think. We've had a couple of interviews in a row, and thoroughly enjoyed that. I spoke to Dennis Torish last week, and we both spoke to Alexandra Stein the week before, which was wonderful. Got some more interviews coming up, but today it's just you and me, and we normally have a topic that we talk about, and this week's topic is a bit different in a way because we don't normally focus these days on Jehovah's Witnesses, which is my old group, my old cult. I've sort of felt that I wanted to focus on the broader questions of the psychology of cults and how these groups work. I mean, that's what Cult Hackers is all about. And there's lots of really good YouTube channels and stuff that really focus on that. So we're a bit different. We talk about cults from a psychology perspective, but I couldn't resist getting a bit sucked down the old XJW rabbit hole this week because there's kind of big news on the JW front, Jehovah's Witness front. And so that got me kind of interested in the annual general meeting, which is something that is a big deal nowadays. When I was growing up, I don't even remember there being one. There must have been, but no one seemed to know anything about it.
I don't remember you ever mentioning it as something of import.
No. The AGM now seems to be where they announce sort of big changes to things. So this has happened this year. So there's one major thing, a couple of doctrinal things as well. If you want a proper rebuttal of all of that, then I would recommend our friend Riley and checking out his Jexit channel because he's always onto stuff like that. I also took some information from a channel called XJW Panda, which I didn't really know about, and listened to that. It's quite informative, nicely put together. And the other one is, of course, Wally on XJW Thoughts, who I tend to go to for info. So I'm kind of referencing them because I've got some of my information from there, but also from the JW.org website itself. So I'm going to read the breaking news to you, Celine, because you don't know this yet, I don't think.
No, so I don't really know anything. You said you sort of alluded to it the other day, and I was like, I don't know anything about it. So then we just didn't talk about it so that we could talk about it on the podcast.
So this is the breaking news on the JW.org news site. So this is actually their own site. It says on October 7th, 2023, at the annual meeting of the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society of Pennsylvania, the following exciting announcement was made. Beginning November the 1st, 2023, congregation publishers will no longer be asked to report the amount of time they spend in the ministry. Nor will publishers be asked to report their placements, the videos they show, or return visits. Instead, the field service report will simply have a box that allows each publisher to indicate that he or she shared in any form of the ministry during the month. There will be one more box where publishers can report the number of different Bible studies they conduct. Missionaries, circuit overseers and their wives, special pioneers, regular pioneers and auxiliary pioneers will continue to report the number of hours they spend in the ministry along with the number of different Bible studies they conduct. Further information about this adjustment will be provided to all congregations in the coming weeks. So what do you think about that?
So publishers meaning just the general
rank
populace,
and file Jehovah's Witnesses, which is the vast majority. Pioneers, I don't know what the requirement now is. It's something like 2.5. I think it's gone down so much, but no, I think is it 50 or 60? I don't know. It was 90 when I was a pioneer. It's now down to I think 50 a month, 50 hours a month. So they will still need to report their time, as will special pioneers who generally they have a greater requirement, but there's very few of those really. And circuit overseers. So other than that, there'll be no more reporting, which I think is really, really interesting.
You think it's in response to all of the cult finger pointing, and they're sort of trying to make it look less culty.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we've talked about this quite a lot on this podcast. I don't obviously believe that it's been us that's made them do that. Before anybody starts to think I've got delusions of grandeur. No, obviously from an organizational psychology perspective or an organizational perspective, as somebody that works in businesses, I've focused on the whole point around KPIs. We have a saying in industry, which you've probably heard of yourself: what gets measured gets done, which is, I think, quite an interesting saying. So we talk about that in organizations. What gets measured gets done. So the idea behind that is if you're tending to something, if you're measuring something, then that becomes a focus for actually making sure that thing gets done.
Okay, so in response to that, so I'm just thinking about in certain KPIs in previous sort of sales jobs I've had. It's true if I guess it was being monitored, you're more likely to kind of push to achieve those things. Like if no one knows how much you've sold, there's I guess less fear of kickback if you've not sold as much as you're meant to sell, for instance. But then also in the instance where there was, say, and you knew you'd done everything you could, but you still didn't sell as much, but you get sort of reprimanded for it. There's that kind of negative thing. So I guess, do you think there's a chance that okay, follow-up question, does the org share these numbers? So when you give in your reports to say I've done X amount of hours, do they then share that information?
Only the elders get to see that.
Okay.
The elders get to see it if they want to.
So it's not like a set of reports that go out.
It doesn't. They don't put it up on the notice board for everybody to see.
Yeah, to be like, look how much we've been doing. Because I was wondering, I was like, oh, because if they do that and it's actually quite low, you might not want to have the report.
Yeah, that is. I think that is the suspicion that a lot of the commentators have. That the people that I mentioned that have already reported on this.
Yeah. So rather than it like going down as a result of this, it's already on the downward turn.
That's the suspicion.
And they don't want to keep. To be quite honest, I imagine that there's people that it will already be on. It will be lower anyway. But I imagine if you're one of those people that's sort of less believing of it in the religion sense, but you're going because your family goes and for more the, those kind of social reasons. If you're not being monitored, you might be like, nice.
Yeah. So just to clarify, so what happens is you put a report in currently up to November. So I'm interested if anybody's going to care to do it in October. That's kind of an interesting question, but anyway,
it's a bit of a weird thing.
So what would happen is you put your report in, which would include the number of hours, your name's on the report, number of hours, magazines, Bible studies, books you've placed, magazines you've placed, and nowadays it also included in videos you've played. And so you'd record that information. That information gets, so the service overseer, the person responsible for field service in the congregation, he will look at it and obviously would know. In theory, any of the elders could see that report. And if you're slipping down, like if you're not doing very many hours, then maybe you get a shepherding call or a conversation with maybe your Bible study conductor as was, but they don't do that anymore. So just an elder, I suppose. So this is going back the way that it used to work. So yeah, it did have consequences, but it wasn't put on not all of the rank and file would know, only the elders would know. And then what happens is that report gets all collated together for the congregation, and that congregation report gets sent to the headquarters. For us, it'd been in London in the UK, and then it gets sent to the headquarters in New York. So it is data that was used to make predictions about what's going to happen in the future, what the activity is. So my point here, from an organizational perspective, this suggests that this data is not of very much value anymore. So in organizations, trying to collect data is really important and sometimes quite difficult, especially if you're trying to get it from the rank and file teams. So sometimes I work in organizations where you want people to record things like we call it short interval control. So it's basically you're recording what in manufacturing, for instance, you'd record how many packs you'd done, how much waste you'd had, how many were overweight, underweight, all those things. And you record that every hour on a sheet of paper. That gets collated. And then you can, as a manager, you can then see, what are the problems? What are the areas that we need to work on? So it's live data and you're able to use it. Highly mechanized systems would collect that data straight away, and it's used to make decisions about what you should do and how you should manage the plant. I find this very interesting because we've talked about this. I've talked about it quite a lot because I've looked at organizations like Jehovah's Witnesses and applied this sort of KPI mentality onto it. So KPIs are key performance indicators, and all organizations have them. So there's some way that as an organization you can determine how well you're doing and where you need to target to improve things. Now, if you go to all that trouble to get people to fill things in, and believe you me, it's really difficult to get people to report on what they're doing because people just don't want to do it and they feel it's a waste of time. Jehovah's Witnesses have been doing this for like about 100 years, and it has become part of the culture. They are used to doing it. For you to say we don't need this data anymore as a manager, that's a really bold thing, because believe me, you're not going to get them to do it again. In 6 months' time, there's no way you can say, right, we now need you to start recording your hours again. And I think so. That's a really important thing. Now, it is possible, as you said, that part of the problem is that the hours have tanked. So if you're reporting on hours that demonstrate that actually the activity's gone right down the toilet, then maybe from a spinning perspective you don't want to publish that information. But they could have just not published it. They could have said we're not going to publish that data, but still have it to hand, because it would, theoretically it gives them information on which they can make decisions. So I just think that's fascinating. Clearly they don't think that data is of any use anymore. The amount of hours that people are putting in, knocking on doors, doing what they call witnessing work, speaking to people about the Bible, about Armageddon, about the New Order, all that sort of stuff. You no longer need to record that information. And that is such a different culture. That is completely a 180. And I find that fascinating.
Do you think there's any GDPR reasons that they're not doing it? Potentially, because it is data.
It's possible, I suppose, but they've been quite aggressive with that, as far as I understand it, in that they've gone to the individuals and essentially got them to sign that they are willing to for the organization to store information about them. That's my understanding. So they, that's something you can do something about. You can get people to sign away their rights. Unfortunately, it is the way it is. But I just find that so I'm left thinking, well, okay, why are they doing it? So yeah, of course it could be that time's going down. But if that's the case, then don't publish it. Or surely that is giving you some data that you can then act on. So why are they not doing a big push to try and get people to do more witnessing, unless they no longer see that activity as adding any value, so much so that they're just willing to dump that valuable bit of data?
Do you think as well, this is just a guess, but I wonder what the age spread is like in the Jehovah's Witnesses, because obviously we said before, a lot of people leave, and it seems a lot of people leave in their 30s or sort of around that time.
Yeah, it does.
I wonder how many people are like older and therefore can't go knocking on loads of doors as well. So like you say, is it lower anyway? Because as a group, is it an aging population, and therefore it's not really massive benefit as well? I don't know the demographics. Maybe it's just an image issue. They think witnessing just doesn't look good.
Don't forget, time is counted not just on knocking on doors, but doing the cart witnessing, writing letters, what they call informal witnessing, which is just talking to somebody briefly about a magazine or about the Bible, or you can you can define that as anything. So all of that is no longer going to need to be counted as time. And as I've said on this podcast before and on other people's podcasts, actually, that part of the whole way that Jehovah's Witnesses do their ministry is through this whole counting of time. It is the singular KPI, key performance indicator, that was used to determine people's spirituality, really. So, I was never approached by anybody to say, you haven't actually had anybody come into, in scare quotes, the truth. You've had Bible studies, but you've never brought anybody in. I never had any talks about that, but I did have people talk to me about my time. If I wanted to be a ministerial servant, then you need to make sure your hours are up to the average of the congregation. So that was generally the way that they determine whether you were appointed as a ministerial servant or an elder, was whether your hours matched the average of the general congregation. So again, that's going to change now, because a lot of the elders are not pioneers. So in theory, they won't actually have to do any ministry. I mean, you're talking about ticking a box that says, this month I did some ministry. That's it. I mean, can you imagine what that could be?
Well, yeah. I will be curious to see if anything else takes its place. So if, they kind of do this for a bit, and then they want you to start sort of, stating how many people you brought in, something more hardline. I don't know.
I mean, that's very unlikely. They're going in the opposite direction. So I think, so what could it mean? So firstly, think about the consequences. You've now got a 2-tier organization, essentially. You've got a bit like Mormons, there's only some of them go on the door knocking work for a period of time. Essentially, that's what you're going to have here. You're going to have a small, perhaps more professional group of witnesses who are actually going to be doing the preaching work, knocking on doors, so on and so on. They're going to be the core of the preaching work. The majority of what's going to be happening, and I think this is probably where the answer lies, is that it's really about directing people to the website. They are building this huge studio, which is like going to be JW Hollywood, really. So they're making movies there, proper movies. They already do these dramas, but they're going to make movies. They're going to, I think it's really about the broadcasting. It's about the movies they're making. It's about all this media. And they're going to raise funds, I think, through contributions and people, contributing to get these things, these products. It feels much more like a sort of subscription to a kind of religious order than it does the organization that I grew up in. I think it's absolutely fascinating. I mean, the other thing that could be related to this is that the quality of the people that knock on your doors, they are so poorly educated a lot of the time, and they talk such nonsense that they're not a good witness. They don't actually make you think, oh, these people might have something. They sound so unable to string a proper coherent sentence together that you think, well, maybe the society's decided that we can do without them. We can do without those people knocking on doors. Actually, what we need are a professionalized class of witnesses who can do a decent job, and then the rest of everybody can just direct people to the website.
Hi, I'm Tracy.
And I'm Sharon. And we are Feet of Clay, Confessions of the Cult Sisters. So way back in the 1970s, we became radical Christians in the Jesus movement.
We were promoted to leadership in the crazy cult commune Last Days Ministries, founded by none other than Christian music megastar Keith Green.
Now we're sharing our decades-long escape from the trauma and abuse of extreme Christianity.
We tell our own stories and also invite guests to talk about fundamentalism, purity culture, arranged marriages, child abuse, abuse, misogyny, homophobia, power-hungry patriarchy, and much more.
Much, much more. So join us as we share our journey of healing and humor and how we finally found peace and joy on the other side.
Feet of Clay, Confessions of the Cult Sisters, wherever you get your podcasts.
Did you know it's estimated that there are over 3 million podcasts currently out there? So trying to get noticed and grow listeners is really hard. If you're enjoying this podcast, why not tell a friend about it? We can be found on all the podcast apps, so please tell them to search for Cult Hackers. In fact, why not pause the show right here and do it now? You can find the pod link on our show notes, so you can just copy and paste it into a message or share it using your app. Thank you. Now back to the podcast. So that's what it felt like. But then the other thing that's happened, and I've only noticed this because of watching some of those videos that I mentioned, but the AGM also introduced a couple of doctrinal things which seem a bit like they kind of contradict one another. So one of the changes is related to the Great Tribulation and Armageddon. So the idea is that you get this Great Tribulation where all religions get attacked, basically. But so there's a period of time that's called the Great Tribulation. It's a bit fuzzy exactly what's going on there, but one of the things is that all religion gets attacked, apart from Jehovah's Witnesses, and then it's obvious that Jehovah's Witnesses are the only religion left, so they then get attacked by the governments, and then Armageddon happens, which is when everything's destroyed. All the 8 billion people are killed, and it's always been, the doctrine has always been that, you know, once this starts, once religion gets destroyed and the Great Tribulation starts, it's kind of too late then to become a Jehovah's Witness. You can't repent then. It's too late. You know, the door of the ark is now closed. That's it. You know, you're done. But actually, there's a change now. So the idea is that this happens, the Great Tribulation happens. There's a bunch of stuff that happens in this period, including the destruction of false religion, again, in inverted commas, and then Armageddon comes, and now the doctrine is that actually people might be able to repent and get saved even at that late stage after this thing has happened with false religion, which would suggest that you can kind of wait until that happens before you actually do anything. And I think that's actually quite interesting. Yeah. So, but on the other hand, the other thing that's being said currently is that the message is becoming more judgmental. So actually, they are being much more clear about the fact that if you don't repent, if you don't listen to Jehovah, if you stubbornly refuse to listen to Jehovah and his organization, then you know, this is what's going to happen to you. Judgment message. You are going to die at Armageddon. Which I think that the two don't seem to sit very well together.
It felt like a softening and a hardening simultaneously, which is a bit weird. Yeah, it
is weird, but actually, in a way, not that surprising. It's something that cults do. So on the one hand, that they kind of want to throw you off, so that it's hard to really understand what's happening. I think with the changes in the hour counting time, there is bound to be a feeling that you know, we're slacking off a bit, and we're settling in for the long haul. So that's why I think this judgment message thing is being pushed. It's to stop people thinking that. It's the counterbalance to what people might be thinking around, oh, I don't need to do as much in the ministry, you know. But will there be a ministry? I mean, I'm if you're a pioneer, imagine being a pioneer and nobody's coming out on the ministry with you because nobody thinks there's any point in it. You know, you're on your own now. It's really strange.
Do you think? What do you think the culture shift will be? Because there's a lot of people that, like you said, it's just what they do and they're used to it. So just because they're not being measured, does that mean that they'll stop doing it? Because there's some hard, you know, proper believers, but you do.
Yeah. Ultimately, yeah. Jehovah's Witnesses generally don't like going from door to door. They don't enjoy doing it. I hated it. Most Jehovah's Witnesses don't like it. They do it because they think it's the right thing to do. But it becomes a drudgery, and they do it for an hour, perhaps on a Saturday or something. And it just, I mean, it used to be you had to report an hour was the minimum. You couldn't put half an hour, but then they changed that so you could actually just put half an hour. So it has been going in this direction. Yeah, it seems like, so the culture, I think, is going to become much more like you can be a nominal Jehovah's Witness, in theory. So, we always used to say you can't just turn up to the Kingdom Hall every week and think that you're a Jehovah's Witness. It is part of being a witness is to do the preaching work. I just, I don't think that's going to happen. And I repeat my little saying, what gets measured gets done. What you are doing by saying this is that this is not important. If you want to focus people's mind on the importance of something, you measure it. If you don't, then what you are saying essentially is this doesn't really matter. So yeah, there will be some, of course, that carry on doing it, but for a while at least. But I think that'll be like unplugging a fan from the wall. It'll gradually slow down until really the main witnessing work is being done through these movies, TV shows, media, and that'll be paid for through contributions. And that essentially will be the way that witnesses will say they are still preaching.
So I guess the other question then, a sort of a wider question, is, do you think this is a good thing?
It's a really interesting question, Celine. I have been thinking about this. How do we respond to what seems to be positive things, and maybe other positive things will come along? Some ex-JWs are already speculating that this could be the beginning of a watering down of a lot of things, like the blood issue, and I suppose celebrating holidays and disfellowshipping, shunning, and all of that. So is this the beginning? And how should we respond? I mean, obviously it's up to each individual to respond the way they want to. I'm thinking about myself. How would I respond? How do I respond? I think I welcome it. I think I would say I welcome it. Why not? Why would you not welcome reducing the load on the rank and file? And if it means that people now are not discouraged from getting a career, going to university, and because they can build a life for themselves, I welcome that. I absolutely welcome that. Even if it means they are expected to give some percentage of their earnings to the organisation, I still think it's better than putting people into these dead end jobs that mean that they have no future, and then expecting them to spend all their time knocking on doors and preaching. So if that's the direction they're going, then I absolutely welcome that.
Do you think it's likely that people will be spending time that they now have to do things they want to do or couldn't do before, rather than it just sort of shifting into other JW stuff, if you know what I mean? Like, reading more Bible, reading more of the Watchtower. Do you think they'll shift more into doing other things?
I think, again, it's hard to generalize because people will respond differently, but I think the majority of people, my prediction would be that, the majority of people will spend their time they would have spent knocking on doors or sitting at a cart. They'll spend that time doing things that everybody else does, getting a career, earning a living, doing fun things at the weekend instead of wasting their time pounding the streets. I think that the vast majority of Jehovah's Witnesses are just going through the motions at most of the time, and this is a motion that they won't have to go through anymore, and I think they'll be really relieved. They probably won't say that, and it'll be spun differently, but I think that's the reality. Who knows? I mean, it's possible they'll introduce some other activity that they want the rank and file to do. That would be consistent with the way that cults operate. We've often said that one of the things that cults do is keep you busy, so that you don't have time to think about things. It could be a real own goal. I mean, I actually feel it is possible own goal. shoot yourself in the foot, whatever metaphor you want to use. I think it's a very strange decision. Obviously, I welcome it, but I go back to this: what gets measured gets done. I think the whole culture around the preaching work, maybe it's been on the wane already. So, maybe this is just a reaction to the reality of what's happening on the ground. But as I say, it's not like Jehovah's Witnesses leadership to just follow what the rank and file are doing. They normally lead. They would, if they wanted people to do more ministry, they would be saying it. But they're not. So, or it doesn't sound like they are. They're this is a different sort of message. This is a message that says, just a small amount of something is better than nothing. And I think that's quite interesting.
It's very different. I was just thinking, it's a very different place than what you left now, isn't it?
It is.
So with this, so even before we're just the tailing down the hours, but now, it's just a tick box exercise. It made me think as well about like the quick builds and things you talk about. I don't really hear anyone talk about that as a thing now. If anything, they're just selling off the buildings that were built during that period of time. It's very different landscape wise. Why do you think it's very different?
I think it's because I think they're right about the fact that business model, and I do call it a business model because that's what it is. That business model was dying in a world of media. Everybody's got a piece of media in their pocket constantly where they can access information, look up anything on Google, and so on and so on. The idea of people trudging the streets, knocking on doors, is anachronistic, really. It's so old-fashioned, It's not the way that everything's going. Everything is going automated and done in such a way that you can access it whenever you want to. So I think that's basically they're creating a religious media. They were a printing company. Mm-hmm. They were a printing organization. Now they're a media organization.
Do you think you could imagine them doing, so how you used to do that education in how to like do talks and that sort of thing? Do you think you could see them having schools where you go and you learn how to make media content, like social media, like Instagram and Reels and TikTok and stuff?
Yeah, I mean, social media is a tricky one for Jehovah's Witnesses because it's like it's exactly what they don't want people to be doing because it's chaotic. You don't know. Yeah, exactly. You don't know what you're going to find there, and you can't control information that way. So they really discourage people from using social media. So I don't know whether that will be, but I think they will be training people even now. I'm sure they do already in some of the film production skills. You will have courses at the headquarters around how to be a director and how to AD and how to storyboard and all of those. So actually, those are the skills now, not plumbing and bricklaying and window cleaning. The skills they want now are lawyers to defend them from all the attacks they're having from individuals and governments. They want lawyers and they want filmmakers and media experts. So yeah, it's quite interesting. Obviously, time will tell how it affects the culture, but I think it will definitely have an impact on the way that the organisation feels and runs, and it does open the door, I suppose, to nominal Jehovah's Witnesses, where you essentially all you're expected to do is turn up to a meeting every week and contribute financially, and then the organisation does the rest. It produces all this stuff,
and I suppose because I think that's another thing from people we've spoken to from a different phase of the JWs, how it operated. Like I said, there was a much clearer sort of classification. So as in a spiritual being the top class, and then they're not very spiritual, as a polite way of saying it, I suppose, and putting them at the bottom. Whereas if it's not an expectation, I guess, if it's not being measured in that way, probably see a difference in
I think
how it all works.
you'll have an elite. So most of these cults do have an elite group. So if you think about Scientology, they have the Sea Org. I think with Jehovah's Witnesses, they also had the Bethelites, the people that lived in Bethel, that printed the magazines and so on. They were kind of elites. But I think now the elites will be the people that actually still do the ministry. Currently, anyway. I mean, who knows if that's still got a future at all? But the pioneers will be considered elite, I suppose. And again, it's the people making the programs and the broadcasting, the films, and all of that will be seen as the elites, I guess. But for the vast majority, and maybe it is a movement into a more mainstream type of movement. I mean, I know that's what Wally said on his channel. He could be right, but I don't know. It's really hard to know if that's the direction they're going in. Are they just becoming more mainstream, or is it just a readjustment of the way they're organised, and they're still going to be as extreme as ever? Interesting. Obviously time will tell. I think the other thing I just wanted to make a point of is. Obviously we've got these two slightly different messages here. One is, you kind of a bit of slacking off, and the other one is judgment message, which seem to be at odds with each other. But I think just going back to that judgment message again, I haven't watched all of the talks on the AGM, but the bits I have watched, they actually do make me quite angry. I was accused of being a liar for saying that the organisation preaches that people are going to die at Armageddon if they don't become Jehovah's Witnesses. But I think that is being much more explicitly said now, again. And it's always been that. But every now and again, it comes round again, and they get a bit bullshit and start to have a leaflet that says something quite provocative. They had one a few years ago, which was about the end of false religion, and what they're doing there is they're creating an us and them. So this is what cults do, and even normal organizations often like to do this, create this us and them mentality. So I think that's what's at the heart of this. It's like, we've got to stay within this lovely, safe thing, this safe place that we are, and all those dangerous bad people out there, the wicked false religion. But if you think about the arrogance of calling every other belief in the world false religion, and then preaching against it, and then having the gall to be surprised when people say anything bad about it, that's just unbelievable damn cheek as far as I'm concerned. It's okay for you to slag off every single religion out there and say that it's going to get destroyed by God. But if we mention that they're doing something or have said something that's wrong or that hasn't actually happened, suddenly I'm the bad guy. That really just takes the biscuit. It does. How dare they? How dare they? If you are going to throw stones, then you're going to have to expect a few being lobbed back, aren't you? If you think it's your right to tell everybody that they are members of a wicked religion that is run by the devil, then don't be surprised if people don't like it. Don't then shout persecution when people react badly about it.
Stones and glass houses.
Absolutely. Yeah, so that does rile me up somewhat, but anyway, good news, I guess, about the not counting time. I bet that the witnesses will be having parties about this.
Secret parties,
and it'll be spun as such a loving arrangement. What a loving thing to do. But there will be lots of them that will also be thinking to themselves, all of those hours I've put in, and now we don't have to do it. Yeah. Especially if you're older and you've done it all now, and then these youngsters come in who don't have to do the ministry anymore. Or all they need to do is like say, if somebody at work says, what were you doing at the weekend? Oh, I went to an assembly. There you go. That's my bit of witnessing done. Tick. Ching. Oh my goodness.
Oh wow.
Okay, so a bit of a strange one this week. I think it is. We don't often focus on Jehovah's Witnesses specifically. We do obviously speak to ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, and their experience, but I don't go on about it that much these days. I have talked about it at length in the past, but I just, this is too big to not mention, really. And I think it's interesting to look at it from an organizational perspective. Remember, what gets measured gets done. And I think this spells the end of the witnessing work as we know it. I suspect that in a couple of years' time, the whole pioneering thing will change quite radically as well. So that, I think that there'll be other ways that people will be expected to do their sacred service, but I think the knocking on doors days are done.
Well, it doesn't go anywhere, does it? People either hide when they knock on the door, or you answer.
Waste of time.
And
it always was a waste of time.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, some brought people in, I suppose. So it did some things. Some were good at bringing people into the organisation.
If you bring in one person, was it? Obviously, I think it's bad, but I'm not from the organisation's point of view. It's such a huge amount of time and effort to get such little reward.
Absolutely. If you were paying somebody to do it, you would never do it. It's only the fact that they're volunteers.
Oh, it's free,
Essentially, that the labour is completely free. Therefore, it doesn't really matter that it's completely, for the vast majority, a waste of time. I mean, going on the field service for an hour is actually like a 2-hour job, because you've got to get ready, you've got to go to meet for field service, then you go on the field service and you have to get back home. So you're talking about a couple of hours worth of even if it's just for an hour on the doors, faffing and pointless activity. If you were paying people to do it, you just wouldn't.
No. I think it's always been more for the benefit of keeping people busy and doing stuff. I don't think they've ever were under an illusion that it was going to bring swathes of people. Maybe in the beginning
maybe
days.
In the past it was the way to do things, I suppose, that we didn't have media in the same way. You couldn't do JW broadcasting, but now you can. I think that's the change that is happening, which is kind of going to be kind of interesting, really. One of the things that one of the elders on the AGM said really was, I suppose, to head off any criticism of these changes was, we don't apologize. We don't need to apologize for changes and for new light being shed on these things, so that's kind of arrogant, isn't it? We don't need to apologize to all of these witnesses who have been spending their time and effort in this activity, wasting their lives. We don't need to apologize if we get it wrong. That's your problem, not ours.
They're kind of admitting then that it wasn't of benefit previously.
I don't think they were referring specifically to the ministry there. They're talking about changes in doctrine, but it's in the same at the same AGM.
Yeah.
So I think it's hard not to equate. Basically, they're saying, look, it's up to us. We decide. No one else can determine what's going to happen. We decide. We have the power. You shouldn't question it. We make no apologies for getting it wrong. The other thing that I think is coming as well, actually, so here's a bit of a prediction, and I've said this for quite some time. I think the big change, and it's almost there. They're almost there now. They're rolling the pitch, as they say in the UK, to us for this new thing, which I think they're going to say. They're going to say that the Great Tribulation has actually already started. So what this is going to do is avoid all those difficult questions about, you said it was going to happen in this generation, blah, 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 blah. I think they're going to say, it already started. It is the same trick that they pulled when they said 1914 and then it didn't happen. Well, it did, but we just didn't see it. Same trick. It's very, very typical of these apocalyptic groups to say, but it did happen. So I think they're going to say all the things like the COVID and the wars and all the terrible things that are happening. This is evidence that actually Great Tribulation is not a one event. It's a process which started. Pick a number. You'll find something in Ezekiel with some dragon or something or Daniel to be able to count some time and pick a number. They'll find a number that shows that Bible prophecy has been fulfilled. So the Great Tribulation started in 2020 or something. I don't know. That's what they're going to do. Because then they don't need to keep saying You know,
Coming soon.
we've had to change our doctrine about that. They'll say, yeah, we were right.
Mm.
You didn't notice it, but it happened. Yeah.
Well, we'll let you know.
Anyway,
we'll talk about that when they make that announcement.
yeah. Okay, so that's it, I suppose.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Mhm.
Thank you for listening, everybody. It's a bit of a different one, listening to me ramble on a bit. I've just come back from a weekend away. Me and Sarah, your mum, Celine, we went to York, didn't we, for a few days? It was our 30th wedding anniversary, so that was lovely, and had a great time going to all the religious Babylon the Great churches in York, going up the York Minster, fascinating place. Something that I would have never done before, so it was absolutely amazing.
Nice.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Bye.
Oh, don't forget to write a review. Don't forget that review thing. Yeah,
Write a review.
Write a review. Thank you. Bye. See you next time.